Let's kick things off. If you've ever felt, completely hitting a brick wall trying to learn a new language, believe me, you are definitely not alone. We've all been there, right? Staring blankly at textbooks, endlessly flipping through those flashcards, and somehow we walk away still totally unable to hold even the most basic conversation. It's frustrating, but what if I told you the secret to fluency isn't actually hidden in those complex, headache-inducing grammar charts? What if it's literally all about how we naturally process sound? Today, in this explainer, we're exploring a completely fascinating method that takes traditional learning and just flips it entirely upside down. It's surprisingly natural and honestly, almost effortless.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really wrap our heads around the sheer power of this method, we have to look at a 3-year-old kid. The source we're unpacking today shares this incredible real-life story from a creator about her younger cousin. So she was visiting her uncle's house, right? And she noticed something that absolutely blew her mind. Every single time she asked her 3-year-old cousin a question, he didn't just understand her, he confidently answered her back completely in Hindi.
Now you might be thinking, okay, so what's the big deal about a kid speaking Hindi? Well, here is the catch. This toddler was growing up in a strictly Bengali-speaking household. I mean, nobody in his family spoke Hindi. There was absolutely zero Hindi being spoken in his everyday environment at home. So how on earth did he pick it up so flawlessly? Well, when the creator asked her aunt about it, the answer she got was just beautifully simple. He learned a completely new language by just watching cartoons. No way, right? But it's true. He was absorbing all this complex vocabulary and these intricate sentence structures entirely through his favorite TV shows. No textbooks, no flashcards, just raw, unfiltered audio input. This real-world example reveals a surprisingly simple yet absolutely crucial truth. Listening is the absolute first step to learning any language. It really is. Before reading, before writing, way before you try to memorize those endless, boring vocabulary lists, there has to be listening. Think about it. It's exactly how every single one of us learned our mother tongue as babies. But for some reason, as adults or older students, we just skip this foundational step entirely. We just dive headfirst into the written word. We literally try to read a language before we can even hear its natural rhythm. It's wild. So how do we actively put this back into practice for ourselves today? Well, our source outlines this highly practical, super straightforward step-by-step methodology to basically recreate that natural baby-like learning environment. Step 1. Just pick a topic on YouTube that genuinely interests you. It could be literally anything. Movie reviews, motivational speeches, a crazy story, the daily news. Just make sure the video is in English. Step 2. And listen closely because this is highly specific and absolutely crucial. Wear headphones. Why headphones? Because when you have them on, it completely isolates the audio. It shuts out all the annoying distractions of the outside world and literally forces your brain to concentrate on the pronunciation and the flow of the words much more intensely. And step 3, look, if you aren't understanding a video, please don't get frustrated. Just switch to an easier video. The goal here is just exposure, guys, not immediate mastery. And this brilliantly illustrates how we should approach this. You really need to treat this daily practice exactly like a doctor's prescription. Think about it. When you get sick, your doctor might prescribe a specific medicine, right? And they tell you to take it once in the morning and once at night to cure whatever you have. We need to look at our language practice the exact same way. This is not about, cramming for 5 exhausting hours on a random Sunday afternoon. No. It's about that daily, non-negotiable dose of your listening prescription. Consistency is quite literally the medicine that cures language barriers. And the best part? This recommended daily routine is incredibly manageable. We are talking about a minimum of just 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night, dedicated to focused English listening. That's it, a total of just half an hour out of your entire day. It requires such a profoundly small time commitment. But doing it morning and night every single day like clockwork, it signals to your brain that this new audio input is actually important and needs to be processed and kept. Now, to really guarantee success with this, the source gives us a few deeper techniques to sort of layer on top of that 30 minutes. First up, you've got to commit to this method for 3 full months. Give your brain the actual runway it needs to rewire itself to these brand new sounds. Second, try watching a single video repeatedly. Repetition breeds intense familiarity. And finally, this is a cool trick. During your leisure time, actively try to recall the video in your head. Just think back to what you listened to. This kind of mental recall actually strengthens the neural pathways you're building, and you don't even have to open a book to do it. So the crucial point is, once you reach a stage where you can understand these videos easily, like without pausing, without stressing, without overthinking every single syllable, you've actually completed 50% of your language journey. Let that sink in.
Half the battle is already won just by training your ear. The passive input phase does all the heavy lifting for you. It lays down the tracks so that actually speaking becomes a totally natural next step rather than this incredibly forced, stressful effort.
Let's move to and see how this builds into actually speaking out loud. Because, you don't just magically start by giving some complex hour-long speech. You start small, very small, like baby-like sentences. In week 1, just try forming sentences that are maybe 2 to 4 words long. Simple things, like, come here please, or sit down. By month 2, your entire goal is just building confidence. Again, exactly like a baby learning their mother tongue. They babble, they make small requests, they are definitely not worrying about being perfectly grammatical. Then, by month 3, after accumulating all that daily listening input, you can start naturally switching to much bigger, more expressive sentences. It just flows.
This brings us to a really powerful mindset shift. If a 3-year-old child can learn a completely new language just by listening, then seriously, why can't we? A toddler isn't magically, logically smarter than an adult, right? They just aren't terrified of making mistakes, and they simply listen, constantly. Honestly, maintaining your confidence and keeping your motivation high are truly the only tools you actually need to mirror that exact child's success. You've got this.
But this raises a huge, kind of frustrating question. If natural listening is really this effective, why is learning English usually such a nightmare for adults? Well, let's take a look at what traditional schools actually teach us. They drill grammar rules into our heads. They focus heavily on tedious text translation. They hand out these massive, boring lists of vocabulary to memorize. And look, I'm not saying these things are useless. They absolutely have value, but as the starting point, no way. They often just leave students feeling completely stuck. We end up rigidly overanalyzing every single word before we even open our mouths to speak. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the paradigm shift it shows. See, traditional schools are completely obsessed with increasing knowledge. They treat language like it's a history class or a math test, just a strict set of academic facts to be stored away in your brain and tested on paper. But natural listening, that focuses entirely on improving communication. Because let's be real, you do not need to be able to map out a complex sentence diagram just to ask a buddy how their day is going. You just need to know how the language sounds and how it feels to actually participate in a conversation. In fact, the creator of our source material mentioned seeing an absolute flood of comments from viewers that reflect exactly this frustrating struggle. People write in constantly saying things like, they know a lot of grammar and they know a lot of vocabulary, but they still lack in communicating with people. It is so incredibly common. You might have memorized the textbook absolutely flawlessly, right? But then you completely freeze up the very second you have to order a coffee or, chat with a coworker in real life. Your brain might know all the academic rules, but your mouth, it just doesn't have the muscle memory. And that muscle memory only comes from listening and mimicking. Which leads us to a massive, really fundamental question to wrap up this explainer. Should schools drastically change their procedures? Should they actually focus on listening and speaking first, rather than forcing grammar and translation down our throats? Maybe we need to stop treating language as just another academic subject to pass, and start treating it as what it really is, a tool for human connection. It's a pretty provocative thought, and it definitely forces us to rethink our entire language learning journey. Well, that's all for today's explainer. Thank you so much for hanging out and exploring this with me. So go ahead, put down the flashcards, grab those headphones, and I'll see you next time.